What is going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today, Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. I am your host, Sean Murphy, alongside my guy who apparently that morning Woodward show money is treating very well. My boy Jeff Iafredi. Jeff, what's poppin', brother?
What's going on, Sean and Troy? Yeah, this isn't a green screen, I swear. I actually like the piano. I thoroughly enjoy it. We're recording at nighttime, but for some reason,
The sun is shining, dude.
Yeah, hey, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, am I right? So, no, I ain't worried. But,
Yeah,
no,
for
it's good to
sure.
be here, man. We got a lot to talk about. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Excited to be back.
Yeah, dude. It's good to have you back from the grips of death. It's just, it's nice to have you in our domain, but also in our domain, as he is each and every week, our guy, Troy Sergey. Troy, good to see you, my friend. Good to have the full crew together again, and good to have that beautiful, beautiful voice with that beautiful microphone, baby.
Absolutely, Sean. But Sean, I gotta admit, I'm a little bit disappointed. I spent some good money to watch Pacers and Nets on Saturday in person, and 8 guys were out for the Nets, including Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, Kyrie Irving, Royce O'Neal, Joe Harris, their entire rotation. So I got to watch some G League guys alongside with Patty Mills and Markieff Morris torch the Pacers. And I don't know why or how.
Oh,
Tyrese
man.
Halliburton,
Yeah, that's
Miles
the worst
Turner.
part. You had to watch that crappy team win.
Yeah. So needless to say, I guess I told my wife we're buying tickets to Game Of next time because one, the Game Of tickets were cheaper because of obvious reasons, right? People were selling their tickets with because they didn't want to go see a G League team. They wanted to
wore
see
their
Kevin Durant.
city editions too.
And they wore their city editions. Yes.
What the heck? Is this their way of saying that we're putting out our shitty edition of our team? Like what are they doing?
Anyways, I guess Tyrese had a 30-piece, so that was kind of worth it. But other than that, it was not worth it. So
yeah, dude, Tyrese Halliburton is phenomenal. I've been seeing a lot of 2020 redraft talk of late surrounding Halliburton.
Right.
And I've seen people say that they think that that Halliburton should go he should have gone number 1 overall, which is crazy that's a conversation being had, but also just shows you how damn good of a player he is. That COVID, if I think if there's anything that we're seeing from that draft class, it's how much COVID completely screwed up the draft process because teams just had to go off of 1-on-0 workout videos and then film that they had from like previous years. So like there's no chance if the Warriors had James Wiseman like in their building and like gave him like workouts that like he would have been the 2nd overall pick.
Right.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But speaking of crazy, guys, we can dance around all we want. We can have some fun. We know what we got to talk about here today. This is From Half Court. Each and every week, we talk all things NBA basketball, even when NBA basketball doesn't love us back. But if you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the podcast, and subscribe to the channel down below and hit that mother notification bell. But with that, guys, Cade Cunningham is out for the season. Per Shams, confirmed by James Edwards III, and every Pistons beat writer at this point. It's public knowledge. Cade Cunningham will be getting season-ending surgery to repair his fractured shin and will more than likely make a recovery or should make a recovery before training camp of next season. Now, with that, guys, this sucks. Let's just start with the obvious, we'll just start with the most obvious point. This sucks. Troy, Jeff and I, we did a video covering this that came out yesterday. So I want to get your thoughts. What was your initial reaction when you saw Cade Cunningham would miss the rest of the season?
Yeah, certainly disappointed, but to be totally honest with you, not extremely surprised. I know this was a big conversation that we've been having for weeks now since the injury. And I think it sucks because of just the high hopes we had for him in year 2. And, we knew that there was going to be massive growth from even last year's rookie year into this. And we saw a glimpse of that. Of course, in the early parts of the year, we saw a couple 30 pieces, and that 35 piece against the Hawks was a big one. But at the same time, we got to look moving forward with this rest of the season. More minutes for Killian Hayes is going to be good, watching his development as well. I think a guy like Ivy is going to be put in a situation where minutes after minutes after minutes is going to be a good thing with the ball in his hands. Sure, like Steve brought up last week, something with Ivy, though, is, you want to see Ivy with Cade playing with each other, because next season might be a little bit different role with Ivy, with, Cade being the more ball dominant point guard on the floor. But, certainly more minutes are better. Any basketball person knows that to get better at the game of basketball, especially as a rookie, means you got to play more. And to give more minutes to a guy like Ivy and Killian are going to be a great thing for our team. So I'm trying to look at the positive. And as well, if it's going to be any year to go down for the rest of the season, this year is the year to do it with such a deep draft class. Even if we don't get the number 1 pick, picks 2, 3, 4, 5 look pretty darn good.
I mean, let's just be honest about it. Like the elephant in the room, like, this is the most valuable lottery to ever have top 3 odds for.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, whether the Pistons get the number 1 pick or not, just the fact that they're in that conversation, and that they're going to be in a position that their balls could potentially bounce in a lucky way to be in that position is valuable. Like, you can't say it isn't. It isn't the team's sole focus. It isn't what the team set out for at the beginning of this year. It certainly isn't like what the players' goals are, right? But at the same time, I think, to your point, Troy, it's like, there are silver linings. There, like with one guy out, there is an opening and there are more opportunities. But at the same time, it's just one of those things where, no matter what, every time I watch this team, it just feels like a missed opportunity. And you just wonder what this group could be doing with Cade at the helm. Because we saw it, because it's not even like with a number 1 overall pick, or like a guy, it's not even like a guy with Chet where it's like, man, like, we're excited to see like what he could do and like come in and like tear up the league, We already knew that Cade could tear up the league, and we were already seeing remnants this season of an all-star caliber campaign. And so I think, to me, like, when I just think, when I just think of it, it's like, I just think of all, like, from like, even just like little stuff, like All-Star Weekend, and just, like everything that this season could have been. But again, like you said, this does open up the opportunity, especially for a guy like, I think Killian Hayes is the guy that's going to get the most benefit out of this, because of the fact that he'll cement that spot in the starting lineup for him. I think with Ivy, I know a lot of people point out that, like, it's going to get him more touches, and that's definitely going to help him. And while I agree with that, I also think that, like, Ivy's game was made easier with Cade being in the lineup. And I think having to learn to play more with the ball in his hands and having to play a different role has been an adjustment for him. And I think we've seen that. But I think also, I think the biggest thing is just you're seeing the effects all across the board, right? It's just like, you're seeing the fact that outside of Bojan, we don't really have a guy right now who can, on a night-to-night basis, consistently get you a bucket, right? And there are certainly guys that can, like, put together competitive efforts, and this team is certainly better than it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. But there's no denying, at the end of the day, no matter how much improvement this roster makes, gotta have Cade, man. Like just,
Definitely.
So obviously this season, in my opinion, was just, we came into this year and, we were excited for the Pistons' future. It felt like this year was going to be the beginning of, like, that kind of launching point. And now it just kind of feels like rather that was pushed to next year,
Yeah, which is certainly a disappointment, because, a lot of the talks that we had this summer are going to be the same talks we're going to have this upcoming summer, because same role. But again, I do think we might be in a better position even as last year, because especially if we keep a guy like Bojan, we have a seasoned vet who can prove himself in his league, but also we'll have another rookie to go alongside with a Sadiq Bey, a Jaden Ivey, a Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, and of course a Cade Cunningham. Just another piece of the puzzle that is going to help us in the long run that we didn't necessarily have last year, besides, of course, the welcoming of Ivy. So I do think we'll be in a better position, at least a little bit, next year than we are this year.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, we already are in a better position than we were last year. But the thing that sucks is that, as you heard, or as you've heard from us, earlier on, as we've said, we've talked about the fact that this year we weren't expecting the lottery to be at the forefront of the conversation. We're having that conversation in December.
Yeah, it was one of those things. If it happens, it happens, and it's happening. And now we get to game plan for it. But to start with the negative, you guys already kind of hit on it too with Cade. I mean, obviously how well he was playing when he was healthy. That also doesn't help, because it's good because you know what you have in Cade. He played well. Okay, you're going to miss him for the rest of the season, but at least you know what you have in Cade. But it's unfortunate now, also not having him, because those expectations we had, it's not even like we had him to win 40 games, make the play-in, but this was an opportunity for these guys to gel together with Cade, right? This team's built around Cade, essentially, and Ivy, but still, it's hard to measure this product without Cade, your franchise player. The good thing is you want him to be 110% healthy. This is clearly the best route for him. It's nothing significant. I mean, you'd much rather be this than an ACL or an Achilles. Like, this is probably on the more friendly side. But the fact that he's missing the entire season, it's not a good thing. But I think you guys hit on the positive, which is guys are going to get more opportunities. Although, it's hard. They're not going to be able to, especially Jaden Ivey, to play with Cade his first year and really understand his role. Now his role's kind of, magnified. And then next year he's going to have to turn it down a little bit with Cade. So that's going to be an adjustment. But nonetheless, for player development, which this year has pretty much turned 100% player development, I don't think really anybody's concerned about the wins. I think it matters more for that, for Killian, for Ivy, even for other guys to get opportunities. So again, and it's going to boost Bojan's trade value because he's getting all the shots. He's putting up amazing numbers. So there's a good side to it and a bad side. But overall, as long as Cade's 110%, man, I don't think anybody's concerned.
I'm glad you brought up Bojan's trade value, Jeff, because that is actually the next story that we have to talk about on today's podcast. And it is the fact that Bojan Bogdanovic, according to Shams, has received interest from dozens of NBA teams, including the Los Angeles Lakers, who reportedly, would like to offer a protected first-round pick in some form of salary filler like a Patrick Beverley. But apparently what's holding up the deal is on the Pistons end. That not only do they like what they're seeing with the play of Bojan on the court, but they also reportedly love what they're seeing off the court as well. And this was expanded on in a story by James Edwards III, who talked about the impact that he's having, and featured multiple quotes from players. And essentially, the overall sense is that ever since coming to Detroit, Bojan Bogdanovic hasn't taken this as a demotion at all. If anything, he bought into the culture day one, immediately ingrained himself in the system, embraced, exactly who this team, was being built around, and now is actually seen as a leader in that locker room. Isaiah Stewart called him one of the smartest basketball players he's ever played with. Cade just talks about how knowledgeable he is and like the value he brings to this team and on the floor. Ivy talks about, how much value he brings off the floor and how much they all respect him because he's played in playoff games. Like, honestly, man, like, I hate to say I told you so. To a lot of people out there, they're like, well, Bojan's going to get traded. Easy. I was like, I wouldn't say that so quickly because I think they like him. And turns out they like him. And I know, and to your point, Jeff, he is value. You bring up a valid argument. And it is the argument of of selling an asset at its highest value, right? A guy who, especially, a guy who's, 33, about to turn 34. We don't know if he can keep this type of play up. But Jeff and Troy, my argument is, who in the hell is Detroit getting in the first round that is, other than Victor Wembanyama, in the next 2 years that's going to be able to do what he's doing offensively?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going to tell you right now, in the next 2 years, nobody from this draft class is going to do what Bojan's doing statistically right now.
Right.
None of them. From a volume standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, it's going to take those guys years to get to where Bojan is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you have him on a team-friendly deal. You have him locked up for the next 2 years. He's a type of player where when he blows by guys, it's never really because of his athleticism. He's sneaky quick for his frame, but a lot of times he's setting it up like with his IQ and with his eyes and with like a lot of things that he's doing from like a fundamental standpoint. So like, I want to start with Jeff because you brought up his trade value, and you actually sent a text in the group chat today, because we have a little group chat where I send like any basketball news or things that I find interesting just so we can all discuss it.
Right.
And you said, man, that made me change my perspective. How so?
Well, I'm much more split. I'll say this because you bring up great points. I could see both sides of it because I think there's great arguments on both sides for keeping or trading away Bojan. But to speak on the trading away, you look at Bojan and you brought up a great point too, finding talent in the first round or even finding talent in general that can match not even Bojan's production, but his experience, which I think is incredibly valued right now for a young team. And you just can't. I mean, Bojan, for what he brings, the only thing I would argue is if you're going to trade him, it would have to be for finding somebody. And Troy's mentioned this. Are we going to keep drafting guys and have a team full of young guys, 21 to 20? You want some veterans on your team, but you also want guys that fit your timeline. And that's what you have to look at with Bojan is, and again, he definitely speeds up their timeline keeping Bojan. So I don't really care what they do, whether they keep him or not. A guy who can get you 19 points, even with Cade's back, I mean, he could still get you 17, 18 points a night. It's valuable. But you have a guy who has an opportunity right now without Cade playing the best basketball of his career, who's not getting any younger. You brought it up. He'll be 34 next season. And a guy who, when the Pistons are in that position to go to the playoffs or contend, how old will he be and what will his production look like? And will you still be able to get value for him? That's really the question. Now, if the Pistons feel like he's invaluable for what he can bring to Isaiah Stewart, like you mentioned, or all the young guys with his experience, his IQ, then I completely understand that. But if you feel like his value is at an all-time high and you can get the most for him right now, I can also see that. So
right.
I'm split right now, to be honest with you, Sean, but I'm kind of leaning towards keeping him just because I love what he brings. I really do. And for the contract you paid him, he's extended. I mean, he's under contract. You still have money available and you have a first round pick. It's tough. But also you look at what Troy could do with assets, what he's proven he could do. I mean, he flipped Jeremy Grant when he was traded for that future first Milwaukee pick. Everyone's initial reaction was, what? And then he flips that and you end up getting Duran. So with Troy's ability, I don't want to question it, whether it be a good move or a bad move, but man, he's grown on me since he's been here. He really has.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Troy, let's not lie. The thought of having another first round pick for Troy Weaver to play with is tantalizing. And, I think there's a lot of validity to what Jeff is saying with the sense that, if you're thinking from, if you were to ever move Bojan, this would be the time to do it. You would immediately be able to get a return, like a better return than what you gave up for him in a first round pick. And Troy Weaver, with his success rate with first round picks, I definitely would understand why you'd want to see that as well. But again, if this team's going to be taking a next step or turning a corner at some point, I think we kind of all agreed that, whether it was the Bojan thing or not, we kind of thought that this was going to be a little bit of a less active trade deadline for the Pistons, right?
Sure.
But I think, to me, I just, you look at the I think you look again at what you brought him in for like the extension that you signed him for, coupled with the salary cap boom that's coming in the next couple of seasons with the new media rights deal on the way. You look at, again, just how much they value him both on and off the court. And, quite frankly, how invaluable he's been as far as points per night. Like I think at a certain point, I think when you have a good basketball player on your team, I think at a certain point, it becomes harder to trade those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up a word earlier, Sean. You said efficient. And this guy's efficiency is too high, in my opinion, to want to move him. Because, again, like you just said, he's a good basketball player. He gets you buckets, right? He sees the floor in ways that people his size and his frame, like you mentioned, don't see. And he can get to the bucket. He can shoot the ball.
This guy got 38 points against LeBron and AD.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy that –
no wonder they want to trade for him.
Right. This guy can score in this league, really against anybody. And he's shown that. And really, all of our 7 wins this season, as of we're recording, is because of him. Not saying that we'd be 0 whatever without him, but
the amount of blowouts we would have if he was not in the lineup.
Right. Like, he's just a guy that can play basketball. He's good for the locker room. He's good for the younger guys' development. He's good for just putting out bodies right now with how our injuries are going. Now, the face of our franchise being injured, right? So, yes, Sean, I would at least hear out some other GMs of what they're willing to give up for. I wouldn't hang up immediately, but certainly I am going to be looking for the rest of the season, Bojan, on my roster if I'm Troy Weaver, because of how good of a basketball player he is and how much efficiency he's had on this season and on this team. So
right. And I think my last thing too is I think you'd have to look at the protections of the pick because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're getting something in return that you actually feel like you will actually convey. And if you trade a protected first round pick, it's not necessarily guaranteed to. Right. So, I think ultimately there's a lot of validity to the conversation. In my opinion, those out there that are asking for the Pistons to trade Bojan Bogdanovic are also a lot of the people that are complaining about how rough it's been and how uncompetitive these games have been. So be careful what you wish for. It's almost a
contradiction to say those two things, right?
Yeah, be very careful what you wish for in that regard. So, I think that's just the important thing to remember is just that, is that there's a lot of value in having guys who are good at basketball.
Yeah.
Turns out. But
that Miami game too, we didn't really touch on that. I mean, what did he have? 7 threes?
Yeah. I mean, in that Lakers game last night, he had 25 points in the third quarter.
See, and that's another thing with Bojan too, is you never have to worry about fit with him. Like he can fit into any system you so choose. He's going to get his, and he can play with other players. So there's a ton of things that he can do, and what makes him more valuable than just simply scoring the basketball. He doesn't cause any issues. He has no ego. He's great for the locker room. He has experience that you can't get elsewhere, or at least in a young player. It's stuff that he just brings that you just can't go and get. But again, it's hard because I can see both arguments. I really can.
Right.
The good thing you have a guy at the helm you trust in Troy Weaver at the end of the day.
Right. And listen, and this is the last thing I'll say, and we'll move on. At a certain point in the rebuild, you got to stop making every move be a rebuild move.
Yeah, stop flipping guys.
Yeah, you got to stop flipping every guy you like and actually you think is good at playing basketball. It's like, oh, hey, awesome, we got a guy who's playing great. Let's trade him.
Yeah.
Like what's the thought process? You know what I'm saying? Like at some point, guys, like for heaven's sakes, man, we need guys who can shoot. Like, come on now.
And he can shoot.
Yeah, for sure. And it's going to be interesting. We even another guy, Alec Burks, a guy who I thought very at the beginning, I was like, oh yeah, he'll be here 1 year. Okay. I have really enjoyed watching Alec Burks, and I would not mind if Detroit was able to bring him back, especially the prospects of having a bench featuring both Bojan and Burks. That would be incredible.
It's dangerous.
Like, that's what I'm saying, man. Like, if you keep on Bojan and you get that talent next year, like, this team could make some noise, dude.
And you talked about veteran experience. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Alec Burks, what he's done for the guards on this team, I think is something that doesn't get talked about enough. Like being a mentor for the others. He could shoot the ball. He could score. He could play the one or the two. Like Alec Burks to me, I love Alec Burks. He's younger than Bojan. He's going to be cheaper as well. If you keep them both, my God, you keep building through the draft, through free agency. Maybe you can flip some of those players for a big time player. You never know. So yeah, I'm on the keep Burks train as well. Like I don't want to flip Burks. I love what I've seen. He's been a big reason why, because we look at the Pistons and their bench unit as a reason why they've stayed in these games. Burks has had a lot to do with that.
Yeah. I mean, Troy, you look at the, the season as a whole, like what's transpired, ever since Burks has made his debut against the Knicks, this team has only lost by double digits 3 times. And this was a team at the beginning of the year that couldn't stay within single digits. You know what I mean?
Actually, since the roster that we've been putting out recently, even with Cade's, injury. So that shows you a lot what Burks can do. And I guess maybe I would still say, certainly like you guys, keep them as far as the season. But in the offseason, I might be a little more willing to at least explore some trades in the offseason, just because I feel like that's the time that, teams...
the problem is, Troy, is that he's a free agent this offseason.
Oh, yeah, I guess. I guess I didn't forget it. I forgot his deal. But
Bojan.
Yeah, I'm still probably wanting to bring Bojan back next season.
Okay.
Regardless.
Yeah, that's fair.
But how about the deadline? We can shop Burks at the deadline, but until then, I want to keep him.
Yeah, and if you could get him for a cheap deal, like a 2-3 year deal, $30 million deal or whatever it is, I'm all for it.
Sure. And listen, if Detroit can somehow if they can find a way to turn Bojan or Burks into, or like Bojan and even Burks into like a first round pick and a young player that you really like, that's not something that you exactly that turn away from. So at the end of the day, like Troy Weaver's absolutely going to take calls. He's going to listen. But I think really what the sentiment is that they're going to really have to love the deal in order for them to give up, because they're not in a position like Utah where they're going to be willing to give them up for next to nothing, So,
certainly. And that's a little surprising too on Utah's part, just because of how well of a season he had. I get they were rebuilding and shaking their whole roster up, but man, I mean, he had games like he's been having for the Pistons on the Jazz last year, right? Like how he's playing should be no surprise, but it's just interesting.
Now, guys, it's a beautiful time in the pod, and it's a new segment I just came up with in the top of my head, because it's something that we said we are going to discuss on this pod, but I want to introduce it in a way that people at home can understand, in a segment that we like to call Sean Was Right. And on today's segment of Sean Was Right, we are talking about the New Orleans Pelicans. Ooh, do I like the New Orleans Pelicans right now. Winners of 7 in a row, won 9 of their last 10. Guys, these boys can defend. And you look top to bottom, these are just some gritty ass basketball players that all ain't taking nothing from nobody. Like from top to bottom, man. I love Dyson Daniels. I love Herb Jones. I love Jose Alvarado. I love Jonas Valanciunas. I love Devontae Graham. Like there's just like, this team just has guys from top to bottom. And you throw in Trey Murphy, you throw in CJ McCollum, you throw in a healthy, in shape Zion Williamson. And this roster is exactly what I thought it could be, man. This roster is dominant, and right now is sitting at the top of the Western Conference. So,
hey, find me a good team, I'll find you a good head coach as well. So, shout out to Willie Green, by the way.
Willie Green, dude,
he's doing a fantastic job.
Detroit, 3-1-3.
Yeah. But you're right, Sean. The Pelicans are dangerous. They're deep, very deep.
Deepest team in the NBA, man. Deepest team. Like from top to bottom, I love their roster. And like the crazy thing is too, like they like the way it's constructed, they can play so many different styles. because they can have Valanciunas out there and they can play with size. They can let him play in the perimeter and shoot the three. And then if they want to, they can bring in Larry Nance Jr. instead and just switch on everything. And the thing is that they have the perfect players to do that with because they're all long. They're all athletic. They're all like their defensive IQs are really high, but also they're good. They're good players in the offensive end too. They can handle the ball. They can score. Like there's just, to me, like when you look at teams that like have very few weaknesses, I mean, Troy, this team just doesn't have many holes.
Certainly. Yeah, they're a team that I think built on, obviously you mentioned some of those guys named Zion, Ingram, but CJ McCollum's been really impressing me. We talked a little bit before the pod about the Pelicans and how, Sean was right on this one. And I just feel like how CJ's been playing is helping them a lot too. But Zion's defense as well, you brought that up. That's a great thing. And really, we know defense wins championships. So, the big win against the Suns the other night. And I feel like, that might have been a confidence booster in this team too. I think that if this team knows that they can beat, the team with the best record, last year's, number one seed, I feel like they can beat anyone in this league. And I think, you throw in teams because of the West is so wide open. You can think of teams like Denver, right? Phoenix, who I just brought up, Dallas. I know they're struggling a little bit. But these are teams that I feel like the Pelicans, if they were to go against them in a 7-game series in the playoffs, I feel like the Pelicans are going to be walking into that series thinking that it's theirs to lose because they're probably going to be the better team, right?
And when you talk about a team that is constructed for playoff basketball,
yeah, it's this one.
This is the team.
Yeah,
because in playoff basketball, it slows down. It gets grittier. It becomes more of a grind. You're sweating harder. Your muscles are aching more. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to which teams can grind it out and get you a win. This team can bang in the post. This team can shoot. Yeah, this team can shoot from the three. This team can run. This team can slow down. What can this team not do?
Yeah. And they have so many different threats too. Yeah. And that's where the depth gets you, right? And they needed a guy like CJ McCollum. I think it's a perfect fit for him. Even with Dame and CJ were together, we always knew and looked at it from an outside perspective. Those two were going to be better on different teams. And CJ is thriving with the Pelicans. They have so much talent.
Portland's thriving, by the way, with Anthony Simons too. That deal didn't turn out too bad for them.
No, it didn't at all. And he filled in that spot perfectly. But with CJ in this team as currently constructed, they have not just a deep team and a complete team. And like you alluded to, Sean, you hit on perfectly. They can play in so many different styles, but they have the right players fitting the right roles, like Jose Alvarado coming off your bench, getting in guys' heads. I mean, you saw they basically broke the Suns mentally at the end of that game. Like, this is a team that I think, especially in the postseason, is going to be extremely dangerous. And they're playing with something, that inexperience, that fearlessness. Like, they don't know what it's like. It's kind of like what the Memphis Grizzlies had.
Right. I was just going to say that.
Like, they play with this cocky, like, swagger of they don't really know what it is to. I mean, CJ does, but some of the younger guys, the guys they really rely on other than CJ, I'm excited to see where this team goes. And I do think they're going to be dangerous. If they're healthy, if Zion and everybody's able to stay healthy, man, I wouldn't want to mess with them in the playoffs.
That's the $1 million question. But, guys, I mean, the only reason why I'd be concerned with Zion's health is if he wasn't in shape. But Zion's in the greatest shape of his life, man. And you can just see it. Like, before with Zion in the 20, like, even when he was having that dominant campaign statistically a couple years ago, you could still see there was a limit to it because he was winded defensively. He couldn't really do, much else beyond what he was doing on the offensive end. He wasn't having, much of an impact elsewhere. But now I think what you're seeing is that, I think you're seeing a guy that he might be even in better shape than when he was at Duke. Right. And when Zion was at Duke, I can confidently say that's one of the most explosive basketball players I've ever seen in my entire life.
Mm-hmm. When
he came into the NBA, I didn't see that guy. Like I was waiting for that guy to come back.
Mm-hmm.
That guy is back.
Yeah.
And he is all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at that number 1 and number 2 overall pick in that draft, that is currently the number 1 and number 2 seed in the Western Conference. I know a lot of people were very quick to say that the Pelicans should have drafted Ja. And to this point, Ja has had a hell of a career. But y'all, are you telling me in a playoff series, Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, like, are you telling me you don't feel pretty damn good having Zion Williamson on your side? A guy that can bang with anybody and can get down to the post and dunk it whenever he wants to. This is a guy that has the dominance of Shaq, and he's 6'7".
Yeah. Got that Charles Barkley body. Not anymore.
Think about that series, though.
He's got that in shape Charles Barkley body.
Think about a Memphis Grizzlies, New Orleans Pelicans Western Conference Finals. Are you there for it, Sean? Are you injecting that in your veins?
Dude, I am all the way there for it. Like if you were to look at the playoffs and how they would currently, like let's say things were to go according to plan, we'd have a conference semis of Pelicans, Suns, Grizzlies, Nuggets. Are you not like watching every second of both of those series?
Yeah, definitely.
Like, dude, this is just, when we talk about the level of basketball that we're seeing. And if the plan were to go according to plan, we'd have Warriors Pelicans round 1. Unbelievable, man. Basketball's the best. It's undefeated.
Yeah.
It really is. Oh lordy, the Pelicans just make me excited to tune in and watch what's happening. You know what team doesn't make me excited? The Dallas Mavericks at all. They suck. Like they suck. Like I don't know about you guys, but like, you know, watching them against the Pistons and even just like every time I've seen them throughout this year as a whole, I know we're talking about, you know, like I know people have talked about, you know, like, you know, Luka and the MVP conversation and everything he's done and how incredible that is. To me, guys, this looks like a worse version of the Harden Rockets, where like you have a ton of guys that are around Luka that are shooters. You don't really have anyone that can actually create their own offense. And the problem is they don't really have like any natural trade pieces to go out and make a move. They kind of just have some really crappy contracts. Like, I don't like what's going on in Dallas.
Yeah. And I want to bring this up too, because it kind of goes off what you said. Lindsey Hunter was filling in for Braylon this week. And I asked him.
Shout out Lindsey, by the way. Love that, man.
Listen, yeah,
Well, I would love to have that guy in the pod, by the way. We got to make that happen.
Oh, dude, he's one of the most intelligent people. I mean, he would be great. And he mentioned, actually, it's funny, he mentioned Luka. And he asked me, he's like, what's the difference between Luka Doncic right now and James Harden in Houston? And immediately I'm like, well, I feel like Luka at his age has a higher basketball IQ because Harden at that age was much older. But I'm like, honestly, in terms of play style, not really anything much. I mean, looking at how the roster is currently constructed, and that's kind of where the Mavericks are heading right now. I mean, you want to get Luka a true number 2 option and not like the Houston Rockets try to do with James, where it was just constant bad fit over constant bad fit. I actually liked Chris Paul, but he wasn't healthy in some of the biggest games they had. But they got to do better with Luka. And Luka's play style, I love Jason Kidd, but that ain't gonna last. I mean, that's not how you win in today's NBA. It's you can't throw the ball in Luka's hands, get a bunch of shooters, and say, all right, let's go to the finals. Now in the postseason, that's extremely dangerous because he's flourished. He had a Jalen Brunson alongside him. Even if this team makes the playoffs, he's going to be gassed. And he's not going to be able to string together the effort he did last postseason. So they got to do better. I mean, you got to find a way. You lost Brunson. How do you replace him? It's not Christian Wood. I'll tell you that.
He's averaging 37 minutes a game. Like,
gosh.
This guy had no break. He's been playing 14 months of basketball.
Yeah. He literally, like, this guy doesn't stop.
Yeah. Played in the summer, too.
Yeah. Like,
and it's not like he got LeBron's body.
Well, and like you talk about, and like a lot of people like might be like, well, why does he play in the summer? Like you talk about like a lot of guys, and like US basketball for like FIBA or like stuff like that, there's not really like the obligation or the need to, because we're going to be fine. Like we're going to qualify and we have enough talent and a deep enough, like pool of players that we can get through without having to have our best players play every summer. Luka Doncic comes from a country that before he started playing basketball for them, never qualified for the Olympics.
Right.
So for them, basketball wasn't even a conversation until he came into it. So for him to have the opportunity to not only get his team to a point where they could potentially medal, but even to be in the Olympics in the first place is huge for his country. So that's why he does it. But the thing is that it comes down to the fact that, to your guys, is like you can't expect him to go out and do that each and every night. And we saw, Troy, like Jeff brought it up, how much Jalen Brunson meant to this team, and like how much, like just look at how much Luka was able to accomplish with just having a Jalen Brunson by him.
Right.
Imagine if you got him an all-star guard. Imagine if you got him a worthy creator and a ball handler, someone that didn't need, to like, create that didn't need the ball at all times, but also if you needed him to go create their own shot, they could do it. Like, it's just so glaring to me, man, that he just needs a guy next to him.
Right. Yeah, he certainly does. And like you said, Christian Wood just isn't that guy. And I think for Luka, man, and for the Mavs organization, I don't know if this would help, but just sit him for 5 games. Just sit him for 5 games.
Load management.
Like I know that they're doing that thing where it's like, oh, they'll play him for 9 or 10, and then they'll sit him for 1. But that's just not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Sit him for 5 games in a row. I feel like that'll somewhat help, I guess, him, just being totally gassed now.
But then they go 0-5.
But that's the problem, man. They can't afford to, because they, like, even with him in the lineup, they've been blowing leads and having tough losses. Yeah. Like this, like you look at this roster, like this team brought in Kemba Walker because of where they were at.
Yeah, right. And it's unfortunate because we know what this team did last year, but this team is a different team than last year because of Brunson being gone in a lot of ways. Really, Luka being the face of your franchise is kind of really the only thing that's similar. Now Tim Hardaway Jr. is playing fine, but really that Milwaukee game on Friday night to me showed really how gassed he was because of how much of a lead they blew. You got Giannis foul out with a few minutes left and you still couldn't close the deal. You blew a 6-point lead with 50 seconds left. Like,
yeah. And that's where Jalen Brunson's value comes into play, because during that stretch, you have another guy that can go get a button. And listen, I love Spencer Dinwiddie, obviously Pistons legend, getting away from us, but still, it doesn't change the fact that Brunson, as much as me and Sean went back and forth over what his value was, no one argued his skill as a basketball player. He's super skilled, he's super intelligent, and you see how much he meant to that Mavericks team. I mean, you could see it clear as day right now.
Yeah, you could see how much they should have paid up. Like you could tell the value, the value for them was pretty high. But you look at the flexibility that they have going forward. It almost is non-existent. You look at obviously they have Luka signed on that Supermax extension.
Right.
They have Spencer Dinwiddie through next season. They have Tim Hardaway Jr. and Davis Bertans, both at almost $20 million each through 2024, 2025. And then, like, on top of that, like, you have Reggie Bullock, Dwight Powell, Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, Maxi Kleber, like, guys, where's the trade pieces? Where's the assets? Like, where's the way out? Are you?
But shame on the Mavs for putting themselves in this situation, because you said it before. When you look like a guy like Luka with all the talent that he possesses, and you don't put stars around, this has been an ongoing story in NBA history. We look at the Sixers with AI. We look at even I don't know, they didn't deal in the way. Yeah, LeBron with Cleveland. Like, this is an ongoing story year after year after year, and GMs are not learning the lesson.
Hey,
Well-
they didn't learn it. I mean, they got a championship out of Dirk, but come on. I mean,
Right,
you
right.
got one championship with Dirk.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
and again, it's not that, and again, it's not that, Luka's a guy. This isn't like LeBron where he's 38 years old. He's at the end of his career. Like you need to maximize on this guy's prime. You have a player that only one other team could say this in the past 20 years, in my opinion. Only the Cavaliers and the Mavericks could say that they had a top 5 player in the world from almost when they stepped into the league. Like when Luka stepped in, he was already a top 15, top 20 player in the world. Then the next season already became a top 10 player in the world. I would argue he's 23 years old, and you can make a case for that he's the best player in the world, if not top 5.
Yep. No question.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that he is the best player in the world, but if you say it, damn it, it's not crazy. And especially with everything that he's doing and like how generational of a talent he is and what he brings. If the Mavericks were to have a guy like Luka and a guy like Dirk back to back and only end up with 2 Larry O'Brien trophies or even 1, that would be the greatest whiff in the history of basketball. So I don't know what Dallas's plan is, but they're gonna have to get something soon, because I'm telling you right now, like, guys like Jaden, Jaden Hardy aren't gonna be the, guys that are gonna get you out of this mess.
Yeah, no doubt.
Do we at least think play in? I'm still in the play in.
Yeah, I mean, of course,
conversation.
team's good enough to get to the play-in, but like,
Yeah.
this team made the Western Conference Finals last year.
Right.
I mean, like, bloody hell, you have Luka Doncic, like in his early 20s. What's the excuse to not be competing every single year?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm a team over here like the Detroit Pistons, and I'm like dying for a chance to be competitive, we have a guy like Cade on the sidelines. Like, we are like scratching and clawing to get to that position. You have a guy like that on your roster, and you have the balls to put that roster out there? Are you kidding me? We got to have a conversation about the Dallas Mavericks, man. They've been run like garbage for the past 5+ years.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, Mark Cuban, I feel like, is better than this as an owner.
You would think he's a smart. You would think, but like, I just don't like their moves, man.
Yeah.
It's just that it just comes down to as simple as that. They put money in like mid-tier guys, like when they traded Kristaps Porzingis, they didn't get the greatest contracts in return. Like, I don't know, like, it just feels like they traded one bad contract and took 2 of them back instead. Like with Dinwiddie and Bertans.
That Bertans contract is
whack.
Terrible.
Whack.
Whack is a good word.
It is whack.
Whack.
Oh my Lord. But speaking of whack or not whack, the Los Angeles Lakers whacked the Pistons last night and have been whacking teams over the last couple of weeks, in particular with the dominance of Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
How great he's been. But guys, we also have been seeing as well that LeBron James is starting to come back into form too. And when LeBron and Anthony Davis are healthy, and when they're on, they give this team a chance to win just about any night.
Yep.
And at this point, according to reports, they're looking at guys like Bojan Bogdanovic. They're also trying to look at guys like Evan Fournier with New York. They're just looking for shooting. And I personally don't know what trade they're going to be able to make this team more competitive than they are. I personally think it would take an incredible season from Anthony Davis just to get this team to the play-in. But guys, they're in a tricky situation because they could either move some significant future assets and make this team pretty competitive and make some noise. But can they get to a point where they're going to like actually be a believable contender? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. That's the real question. And I would answer that with no. But
that's the real question. And my answer is no.
No,
it's like, all right,
no.
well, there you go.
Listen, I love how the Lakers been playing, and specifically about that, I love Darvin Ham. So if they're winning games, I'm happy for him. I think he deserves everything and then some. But with how this team's been flowing, I think you hit on it. AD, finally, the role for AD has been carved out. Don't shoot threes, or if you're going to, don't settle for threes. Dominate in the post. He's getting back to the AD we thought he was going to be after they won that bubble championship. And now that he's healthy for the most part, I know he left the Pistons game early. He's dealing with a flu issue, which, okay, all right, it's Anthony Davis, typical fashion. But still, love Anthony Davis. I think he's got all the talent in the world. You have LeBron who's back from that injury. He's playing well. And Russell Westbrook, I got to give some credit to Russell Westbrook because not only did they finally, get his role straight, but I think he's really taken and embraced his role. Coming off the bench, he's playing with a ton of energy. I watched the Lakers and Bucks game about a week ago, and he was making plays out there that it looked like young Russ in terms of he was chasing loose balls. Like he really wanted to win, and I love that I've been seeing that out of Russ. So I think everything collectively has been able to gel, and Darvin's done a good job with that team. So overall, Lakers have looked better. But how much better? Are we talking, are they contenders? No, I'm not going to go that far. I think maybe they make the playoffs. Maybe they win a series, but I don't think they do much more than that.
Yeah, I agree. With the Russ situation, I just keep coming back to this thought that I've had in my head. And, I feel like the Lakers, they feel pretty proud of how things are going right now with Russ and how his resurgence, and I'm happy for Russ, it's been good to see him have joy again and to enjoy the game of basketball. But when I look at the Lakers, I just can't help but thinking, hey, dumbass, you should have done this a year ago.
Should have Buddy Hield.
Holy shit, he was cooked a year ago. You could have, I could have told you should have been coming off the bench last year. This was the obvious move. And the difference is Frank Vogel didn't have the nerves to do it. Darvin Ham did. And it's worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worked really well. And, maybe Vogel didn't have the cachet, to make that move. Maybe he didn't have the relationship to make that move. But also, it's been good to see that, it's been good to see that resurgence from him. Now, the truth of the matter is you're still going to see his name in trade conversations because even though he's been good, you still don't want your sixth man getting paid almost $50 million. You know what I mean?
Right.
But Troy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just AD in general. I wanted to touch on that just because of how well he's playing. We talked a little bit last week.
Caliber.
Yeah, right. And just how dominant he is, in the post as well. He had, a great game, for a little bit. He was playing out there with Detroit last night, but also we touched on that Wizards game a couple of weeks ago, week and a half ago, where he had 50 plus. I mean, this is a guy that's capable of that every night. And really, they didn't have that last year, right? His availability, but two, when we did see him, we saw some good games last year, but nothing as dominant as this. I mean, this is bubble performances from AD. This is peak Pelicans performances from AD.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, right, if you still have a LeBron James on your team that, like you mentioned, is still in some, peak performance, caliber, watch out, Western Conference. This is a play-in playoff team that could easily sneak past first round, especially if there's a team. I'm not going to name names, but
just name names. Who cares?
I could see Denver having a really bad series in the first round. Not saying that they're gonna, but I could see them choking.
Fair enough. I mean,
I hope they don't, but they're a team that I feel like could choke in the first round.
Yeah. No, it's a fair take. I mean, hey, I got no issue with that.
I mean,
a lot of teams.
I don't think Jokic is afraid of no man. But no, looking at the names some of the names that the Lakers have floated around reportedly. Obviously, Bojan, it sounds like reportedly would be their most desired name. I think he would be a lot of teams' most desired name. But they've also discussed some concepts reportedly around Cam Reddish and Evan Fournier. So if they go I personally don't think that would make them much better than where they're at, especially like I think Evan Fournier is just kind of cooked. That's just where I'm at with him. But at the same time, like again, like are those going to be worth the picks that you give? Like I don't think there's a perfect solution for this team. And also, if I'm being honest with you, I just don't like the fact that Rob Pelinka still gets to make active decisions for them. Like he's the worst general manager in basketball. It's not even close. Like, it's not even close.
Probably the most underqualified as well. You could throw that up there.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. He makes Jeff Saturday look like he's been coaching for 20 years. But anyway, Jeff, we got a new segment, an actual new segment, not like the one I made up earlier.
No,
today.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, my friend.
I was going to say, we got a new segment. I'm going to introduce it to you guys. You can approach it in whatever perspective you want to approach. If you're watching this video and you're a fan of not the Pistons, that's fine. You could answer these questions based on your respective teams. But I have a list of players, and I'm assuming Troy, Sean, you guys are going to operate in terms of Troy Weaver and his perspective. I'm going to throw out a couple of names that are floating around, and you tell me if you take it or leave it. Would you do whatever you can to acquire these players, or are you simply saying, you know what? Screw that. We're moving on. I don't care. All right. And we'll start with the first name. And Sean, you brought this up already. There's a guy down in New York who's unhappy with his role currently. Young. A lot of Pistons fans wanted him here last year. If you could acquire him, that is Cam Reddish. And I'll start with you, Troy. Cam Reddish with the Detroit Pistons. Take it or leave it.
I'm going to leave it just because I feel like there's a lot of projects that we've brought in that we're working with already that I don't necessarily think that he fits the piece with. I just have a hard time throwing him in there mid-season and taking away minutes from even a guy like Livers or even Bagley and just some of the other guys we have going for us right now. I feel like he would mess up too many things for what we have going right now. I just don't want to play with it. Like, not that he would be a bad addition, not that he would suck in Detroit. I think he'd have some good games, whatever, if he were to be on our team, but I'm just not playing with that. So
yeah,
that's fair.
I think the question is, what's the price? Because when you look at a guy with his caliber and like with the talent that he had coming into the league, I think, if all you had to give up was a second round pick and then maybe like a contract for filler, then I could see making the argument for take it. But to Troy's point, even with Cade out of the lineup, you go, man, that would be a great, like, let's add him to the group. Where's he getting playing time?
Exactly.
Is he playing over Bojan? Is he playing over Sadiq? Is he playing over Isaiah Livers? Is he playing over Kevin Knox? Is he even playing over Hamidou Diallo? You know what I mean? Like, is he playing over Jaden Ivey? Is he playing over Kelly? Like, even the guards have to be considered within those lineups. Even guys like Isaiah Stewart has to be considered within those lineups now that he's being played at power forward. So, like, I think when you look at to your point, Troy, the minutes add up quickly. Now, you could bring him in and have him in on a smaller role because he's really not playing for New York anyway. And, you could potentially just bring him in and have him play 15, 20 minutes a night at most and just see what he has. And to Jeff's point, when you're talking about all these reclamation projects that Troy Weaver's had, this is probably one of the more tantalizing names in the league. But one thing I would caution is even if it's been in dysfunctional organizations, it still isn't a great sign that a guy's being bounced around the league and that his name's being brought up in trade discussions as much as it is. So even though I know we see the guy at Duke and we see the potential and the flash, because in case you forget, the three names at Duke, the big three, it was Zion, it was RJ Barrett, it was Cam Reddish. And Cam Reddish hasn't been shit. RJ Barrett's hasn't been that great either, by the way. That's just my opinion. But when you look at it as a whole, I don't know, man. Like when a guy's getting brought up in trade discussions this often, there's generally a reason.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually how I feel too. That's probably the red flag for me. And then Troy's point, I thought he brought up a great point with this young roster you have currently, plenty of talent. You'd want those guys to get all the minutes in the world. And Cam Reddish, as much as you may think it's tantalizing or it's you're looking at it, you're like, wow, Cam Reddish is available for cheap. Even if you trade for him, I don't know. You have your Kevin Knox. That's your reclamation project. I like what Kevin Knox has been doing. I'm going to pass. So we can all agree 3 of us are all leaving it. Cam Reddish. Okay.
I mean, if it's on, like, it's one of those things.
Cheap.
You know what it's kind of like? It's like dessert after a really good Thanksgiving dinner. It's like I'm stuffed, but like at the same time, if you're putting a piece of pie on my table, it's like it's not like I'm not going to eat it.
Yeah, like
you know what I'm saying?
If Troy gets a call and it's like, hey, 2nd round pick, you take a flyer,
Yeah, why
maybe
not?
you take a flyer. All right.
But at the same time, what's the point?
Yeah, no, 100%. Next name I'm going to bring up, a little older, a similar role, but still a player that has much more experience than Cam Reddish and is also unhappy with where they're currently at. And that team is the Phoenix Suns. Jay Crowder. Would you be encouraged to go out and try and acquire a guy like Jay Crowder? You add veteran, you add someone who's played in big games, and if the Pistons are improving, it might be a player you'd want to keep with your core. So I'll start with you this time, Sean. Jay Crowder for not expensive. We're going. If you want offers here, we'll say Jay Crowder for something not too bad or won't hurt your franchise. Would you take him or would you leave him?
I'm a Jay Crowder guy. Having said that, like when you look at, first of all, according to reports and looking at like what Phoenix wants in return for Jay Crowder, they reportedly want to get young players. They don't want to get young players in return. They want to get players who can produce and still play in return. Reportedly, there's been some 3 or 4 team trades being thrown around that would involve Crowder maybe going to Milwaukee, and guys like Eric Gordon maybe going to Phoenix, which is something like that happened would be fascinating. But I also think that Jay Crowder is just the type of guy that he's not going to be happy unless he's in a situation where he can compete.
Yep.
And I think when you look at what you'd have to give up, Phoenix is going to want someone good. They're going to want guys who can play now. So like a guy like Alec Burks is probably gonna have to be in that conversation. A guy like they might even ask for a guy like they might even try to ask for a guy like Bojan, even though I think the value, there's a disparity there. But like to me, I just, again, it's like there's not a perfect trade package where there's not a guy that I feel comfortable giving up and saying, yeah, that's a worthy sacrifice for Jay Crowder, especially, with like, I'm not sure what I'm getting with Jay Crowder down the line. And also, I'm not sure if, maybe I can't go get a guy like Grant Williams in the offseason who's going to be a free agent that I think's a better version of Jay Crowder. So to me, like, I think there's a lot of names out there. I think there's a lot of things they can do. At this time, though, Jeff, if you're asking me if I'm Troy Weaver, hell of a play, but I'm going to pass.
Perfectly summed up.
And I think the way Sean put it is, there's no really one on the Pistons roster right now that I'm willing to sacrifice for Jay Crowder, right? There's no one that I'm willing to give up and say, this guy's good, but he's not as good as Jay Crowder. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no one that's floating through my brain. And I'll add a little twist on it. Since I live in Indiana, I'll be the Pacers GM for a second. And I'm also really not doing that with the Pacers young roster as well.
I don't know, man. I actually don't hate that with the Pacers. If you're asking, if the Pacers, like, if they should be buyers or sellers, or like if they could do anything at the deadline, bringing in a guy like Crowder alongside, like, I'm not gonna lie. All I'm gonna say, tell me you wouldn't want to watch Benedict Mathurin and Jay Crowder be teammates. Tell me you wouldn't want to watch.
Sure, I would. But Sean, the Pacers have a pretty deep young lineup going for them.
They do.
I'm not willing as the Pacers even to give up some of those young guys. I'm just not.
Hey, that's fair. That's fair. And I want to spin the conversation because I mentioned guys that you can go trade for, but what about guys you could trade away? And that's what I'm going to bring up, some Pistons players. I have 2, and I'll start with the first one. We haven't talked about them, and this is something that no one's really been discussing, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts on it. And this isn't immediately, but possibly a deal in the summer. You never know. And in that name, he's been playing really well. He's boosted his stock. And you look in the future, Cade, Jaden Ivey, you have a plethora of guards. Where does Killian Hayes fall into all this?
You bastard.
Where does Killian Hayes fall into all this? Listen, I love what I've seen out of Kill, but the reality is you picked up his option for next year. If a team calls you up, guys, and says, you know what? I like that Killian Hayes guy. I think we can utilize him. I think we can use him. Would you trade him away? Would you take it or leave it? I know you're going to say depending on the offer, and you could say based on this offer I would, based on this offer I wouldn't. You could describe it however you want, but Troy, I'll start with you. Are you taking that trade or are you leaving it?
This is such a hard one, Jeff, because like the Killian we see today is not the same Killian we saw last year and even a month ago. So you have to make the argument and take into consideration that he's going to be playing well, like he has been the past couple of weeks. This just isn't the year for me. I'm going to have to say leave it for now. I just feel like now a year from now, next December, maybe we're saying, you know, I'm ready to take it. But I just feel like he's 21 years old. I don't want to see
21.
another 20. What do you say?
21.
Yeah,
I'm
21.
sorry. I completely derailed you for a dumb meme. Keep going.
I just don't want another Chris Middleton situation. I don't want another Spencer Dinwiddie situation. I just want to see this young kid who was a top 10 pick. And he's shown us that he's capable at times and at moments of playing like a top 10 pick. I want to see what this guy is like. This is year 3 now, but really year 1 didn't really count because of the shortened season, his injury, and just how quickly he had to get in the league. This is year kind of 2.5 right now. I want to see another full year before I'm ready to take a deal.
In my opinion, if the Detroit Pistons are going to trade Killian Hayes, if they were to trade Killian this summer, it would be part of a cash-in trade. It would be a part of the trade where you're sending assets and you're going to try and get a player, like an all-star player, in my opinion. So, right now, unless we are making a trade to go get a star, I say leave it.
Mm-hmm.
If we have an opportunity to go make our team better and go get an all-star caliber player, like whoever's going to be available on the market, I would absolutely be open to having that conversation. But guys, we've even talked about like how valuable Killian would be as a backup point guard.
I know.
If he was doing 13 and 6.
Yeah.
Right? Like just everything that he's bringing right now, like it's like one of those things where before you talked about like trading him, just trying to recoup whatever value you could get. But all of a sudden, with the trajectory he's shown over the last couple of weeks, I would, if I'm Troy Weaver, I have no reason to not give him the rest of the season to see what he has. Like if this summer, because again, that would be the reason why, to me, they would trade Killian this summer, would be to do that because other than that, they like the idea of having the 3-guard combination. And I think if anything, there's been reasons to think it could actually be pretty productive if those guys are on the court together. So I think the only way I'm signing off on that deal is if we're getting a guy in the league that's a top 20 player.
Yep.
And Sean, just for our audience sake, who would be very interested in hearing the answer to this question, who would be a realistic guy that would be a top 20 player in this league that Pistons could go after this summer in a sign and trade or something like that?
Well, I think to answer your question, Troy, and I think this kind of, gets pretty well to like what I think is going to be a story that we're going to be talking about quite a bit over the next few weeks. As of when this podcast drops on December 14th. A key date in the NBA calendar. And Jeff, you and I even talked to you about this in the weekend. This is just how much of a nerd I am. I have the NBA calendar like pretty much memorized. December 15th is when players that were signed this offseason can now be put in trade packages. So guys that, filler contracts or, guys that were, brought on to like complement and end of their bench, or like, if teams are saying, oh, well, this just isn't working, or, oh, we want to, move in a different direction. I think those are certainly teams that are like going to do that. To answer your question, I think guys like DeMar DeRozan are going to be very realistically available for trade coming up very soon. I'm not sure what that fit would be like with Cade, with how much they both need to play in the mid range, but that's certainly a guy that could be on the market. In my opinion, the way things are going, I could see the Miami Heat going in a different direction in the next couple of years, and I could see Jimmy Butler potentially being available on the market. Personally, with his energy and everything that he brings, I would love the idea of having him in the Detroit locker room for a couple of years, like just like the kind of player he is. Kevin Durant is probably always going to be on the trade market this year, but the Pistons aren't doing that, so let's not even have that conversation. And then I think the other thing is, I think each year, I think there's always a team that kind of takes us by surprise and kind of decides to go in a different direction or do something that we didn't expect. And like, I just think when you look at like the entire landscape of the league right now, like there's a lot of teams that like have some decisions to make, like genuine decisions to make. Like, like another guy who's reportedly been on the trade market, and a guy that I actually would be willing to have a conversation of throwing Killian Hayes in a trade for, Kyle Kuzma. Talk about a take it or leave it. Kyle Kuzma is reportedly wanting to be traded from the Washington Wizards. I'm not going to lie, man.
Would be a good guy.
Kyle Kuzma is looking like a damn good player. And he to me, he's just stuck in NBA purgatory. The definition of NBA purgatory.
And he has some Michigan connections from Flint.
Yeah. Flint born and raised, man. This guy's from here, and this guy is like he's 27, so he's like, he's a little bit of an older guy. He's experienced. He's won a championship. Jeff, Kyle Kuzma, take it or leave it.
Oh, now you're flipping it on me now. All right. I guess it just depends on what the value is you giving up for Kuzma. I think he would fill kind of that Bojan role, like he'd come and give you 20 a night, but he fits the timeline. He's 27, and depending on what you're going to be paying him or what you extend him for, I actually don't mind Kuzma. It just depends, I guess, what you're going to give up. If it's Killian Hayes and a future pick, or maybe it's Sadiq Bey, maybe you give up someone like Sadiq, then I think it's worth talking about. Especially he has connections to the city. He could shoot the ball. He could score. I mean, he's scored all three levels. Like
he's
like
been a dirty work guy too.
Absolutely.
Like people underestimate and underrate like what he was to that Lakers team when they won the championship.
Yeah. Good, better defense. He got better defensively when they won that championship.
Like one of the teams that's been floated out there for a trade destination for Kuzma, the Lakers, and there's a reason why. That and they probably missed that guy and are kicking themselves for making that deal. But guys, Jeff, first of all, that was fun. And I would love to keep doing, like whether we do take it or leave it every week, or whether you bring a new segment or a new idea, let's keep doing one, man. That's fun.
I'll keep it cooking. I'll keep it cooking.
Yeah, keep them cooking, man. I love that. And speaking of keeping them cooking, Troy, we can't end an episode without your segments, my friend. Yeah. We can't end a show without some should he, will he, or from Mount Rushmore. What are we doing today, Troy?
Yeah, we're gonna try to do our last segment here of should he, will we. We'll take a turn. It's been about 2 months since we've gone back to Mount Rushmore. So next week we'll be in Mount Rushmore. But today I actually have two players. The only reason the second player is going to be on there is because of how high his basketball reference probability is for Hall of Fame, when I didn't think it was going to be that high. But we're not going to go there for now. Well, let's talk about the first guy, the guy I had planned. And we have to play a little bit of role play with this one, okay? Because this guy is still in the league, and he's still playing good basketball in the league. And he still hasn't made a massive name for himself.
Troy, anytime you ask me to do role play, I will always do it.
All right. So we're going to make a little spin on this. And the role play is actually going to be strictly, this guy retires tomorrow. All right?
Uh-huh.
Are we here for it? This guy retires tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
Will he, should he be in the Hall of Fame? That's Paul George.
Paul George.
George retires tomorrow. What happens?
retires tomorrow.
Goes and sits
So-
on his couch. I
So
think
so
that's
you
what happened.
so you just take the 12-year career
Mhm.
that Paul George has had, the resume that he has, multiple time All-Star. It looks like 6-time All-Star, has gotten as far as the conference finals.
Yep.
Both in the East and the West, has put up a lot of really good numbers. I'm going to say no.
Okay, with that, Sean, what needs to happen for him to get into the Hall of Fame then in the next? Because realistically, he's not going to retire tomorrow. He's going to play another probably 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like the numbers and everything that like he's done, like from like a talent standpoint, he absolutely looks like a Hall of Fame player, and it sounds blasphemous for me to say that he isn't, but to me, for one, I think it's just got to be like just a few more solid years. I think it's just like to continue to build a resume. I think 2, I think we just got to see something as far as signs of life for contention from this Clippers team. I think we have to, we've been talking about Paul George for a long time about how talented he is, how great of a player he is. At one point he was, over the last few years, at one point he was viewed as a top 5 player.
Mm-hmm.
And even, when Kawhi was out, like 2 years ago with that injury in the playoffs, he still got him to the conference finals. But again, this team, like this Clippers team is just been all promise, all premise, all paper. But when it comes to actually getting on the damn court, it seems like the only one that can stay relatively healthy is Paul George. So, I think, that's not his fault, but I just, in particular, I think he just, when he is in the playoffs, we need to keep seeing those like solid performances of late, because people forget, like before, like these last couple of years, Paul George was not he had that like good run in the Eastern Conference Finals at the beginning of his career.
Mm-hmm.
He had that disastrous, couple of years with the OKC Thunder, what happened for them in the postseason. And then he had that really bad bubble performance.
Yeah.
So it hasn't exactly been like a picture perfect career for the guy, but at the same time, he has an impeccable resume. So it feels weird saying he shouldn't be a Hall of Famer if he were to retire tomorrow.
Yeah. Jeff retires tomorrow. What do you think?
Well, I'll bring up a stat. This is a super interesting stat that I just found, and it kind of makes the whole argument a little harder to make against him. Like if you look at win shares through 12 years, these are players that have a similar number than Paul George. Billy Cunningham, Lou Hudson, Chris Webber, Ben Wallace, George McGinnis. You see where I'm going with this? What are all those players?
All of Famers.
And again,
but Jeff, he was on the Pacers, man. Who the hell was on that roster? Of course he was winning. Of course he was getting a share of the win.
So, and look at the 2 other players that are on that list, coincidentally. Blake Griffin, Kevin Love. So my opinion on Paul George, has he done enough? If he retired tomorrow, no. I don't think he should make the Hall of Fame. What he has to do to end his career, I think ideally win a championship. I think that's probably number 1. But the other thing is, and Sean, you brought it up, those moments in the playoffs, like those are significant, because when you're doing those things, like Paul George is an excellent 2-way player. Even now when he's healthy, he's one of the best 2-way players in basketball, in my opinion. I mean, what he can do on the court, but the problem is what happens in the postseason. What happens to playoff P, the self-named playoff P? I mean, that's what you want to see. So, I think Paul can eventually make the Hall of Fame when his career's said and done? I do. But if he retired tomorrow, Troy, no, I don't think he would.
Yeah, I think those are good arguments, and I would have said similar things. But I do think a deep playoff run, potentially even a finals with the Clippers, even if they lose the finals, that could certainly get his argument up there.
If he got the Los Angeles Clippers to the NBA Finals, that alone would get him to the Hall of Fame.
Sure. I think
because of what that franchise has gone through.
Right. Yeah.
The fact that he got him to a conference finals.
Yeah,
almost is something that you put on his resume,
right?
Because of what that organization's been through. Another thing I want to bring up, though, Bill Simmons brought up a good point. I'm talking about this Kawhi and Paul George duo. The Kawhi and Paul George duo, what we thought they were going to be when they were brought together, is just straight up what Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the scary thing. Like what we thought, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were going to do to this league and everything that they were going to be is exactly what Kawhi and Paul George are doing. And I did I actually have a TikTok coming out about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum at some point this week. But I actually looked into it. There are only 4 pairs that if Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were to keep averaging both averaging 27 plus points a game at this point, if they were to keep on that pace, it would be the 4th duo to ever do it. The only other 3, it's Jerry West and what's his name? What's that? I'm complete. I got
West Unsell or Elgin Baylor. What do you think?
It's Baylor. It's Elgin Baylor. It's Elgin Baylor and Jerry West, Shaq and Kobe, James Harden and Russell Westbrook, and then it would be Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
Good company. Good company.
That's rarefied air, man. They're the best duo in basketball, and it's not even close.
Yeah. Okay, so not to delay the podcast another 5 minutes, but we got to do this one just because.
Hey, we're having fun, man. With Jeff here, we're making up for lost time.
Yeah,
Come on now.
I see the argument. I just want you guys to talk first. I'm still a little bit wishy-washy on this one. I got a nice teeter-totter going. Rajon Rondo. Should he be in the Hall of Fame?
All right. Should he? All right. Okay. If you were to take the collective basketball resume of Rajon Rondo, from the beginning of his career to now, that ain't a Hall of Fame player. It's just not, right? He was a great player at the beginning. Clearly, there was some ego and interpersonal stuff in locker rooms that made that an issue. There was also a clear lack of ability to shoot from the beginning of his career. He was able to turn that around a little bit more towards the end. He is a guy that is known for just showing up to teams and winning games and getting teams into the playoffs. And once you get him to the playoffs, playoff Rondo is a different beast. And you look at and you do look at everything that he's done, the amount of minutes he's played in the playoffs. Like, if there is a fringe guy that I could see making the Hall of Fame, it would be Rajon Rondo. However, as impressive as he's been as a performer in the playoffs, as great as as good as he was at the beginning of his career with those Boston Celtics teams, because there was a legitimate point where Rajon Rondo was the best point guard in the NBA.
Right, he was on the championship team.
There was a day that he was the best point guard in the NBA. I also feel like the interpersonal stuff, the amount of teams he's been on, the amount of turnover he's had, the amount of issues he's had in locker rooms, I feel like that has to be put into consideration, paired with also the amount of regular season games where he was just subpar, for a lack of better terms. Like, even though regular season basketball shouldn't be everything that your resume is based on, it should sure as hell play a factor. Right. And you look at what he's done over the past few years in particular, it's not much. And if I'm being real, like a guy who, he really did have a, as far as like the career, if you were to look at the echelon of careers of all time, Rajon Rondo certainly is among like some of the best careers in the NBA. But is he a Hall of Fame player? No. To me, no.
Yeah. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's tough because when you think of a Hall of Fame player, you think of somebody that not only for a long period of time was one of the better players in the NBA, but you look at individual things. Like with Rondo, for me, yes, you'd like him to have a longer, because again, like Sean mentioned, you're on different teams. His career didn't age the best, even though in his older years with New Orleans or with LA, he found success. But most of his success individually came in the playoffs. Like early on in Boston, it was different, but as his career aged on, it seemed like he turned that switch on in the playoffs, which to me that matters. But with Rajon and his resume, where he ranks in the NBA in terms of the all-time assist leaders, steals leaders, him being one of the better point guards the last 2 decades, if not, up there for the best point guard in the last 2 decades, I think that, deserves some consideration. I would probably say, should he? This is tough.
Because
it's how about this? Will he? Yes, I do believe he will make the Hall of Fame, but should he is because I'm a little more harder on how I judge the Hall of Fame, but I'll say yes, just slightly.
I will say, it's tough because I don't want to use the flannel Sam scale for the Hall of Fame, because if I am, then no one who should be in the Hall of Fame is going to get in there. But I mean, it's like you look at Rajon Rondo, and he did kind of have like a Ben Wallace-esque effect, like on teams, in the sense that, he wasn't like the greatest offensive player, but damn it, he was a winning player. Yeah, like he was a defensive force. Like he was one of the best, like he was, like when he was younger, like one of the best defensive players in the league too. Like his ability to pick pockets and get steals was elite. And so like there is certainly like a resume there where you could certainly, put the jacket on that guy. And like I could have I would have a hard time arguing it. The issue is, how many other guys are we going to start seeing over the next few years that are about to become eligible? Because it's like, if you're going to tell me Rajon Rondo should be a Hall of Fame point guard, I feel like Chauncey Billups should be a Hall of Fame point guard first.
I'm here for it.
Like if we're putting, like, that's the thing. It's like, if you're putting Rajon in there, how many great players that have had similar resumes to him that aren't in the Hall of Fame? Right.
Sure.
So like, it's interesting, like that to me, like he's just one of those fringe guys.
Yeah. I'm going to have to go with what Jeff said. Should he? No, just because I don't think his resume, as far as just even his regular season stats, they're just not there for Hall of Fame type, credibility. But will he? I think what we said when we make the rules for this segment, a couple weeks ago, we said a 30-year window. And I do see a 30-year window, even with how deep the league is getting and some of the guys being eligible for the Hall of Fame. I do think one day he will. If that's in 2050, if that's in 2035, I don't know. But I just feel like that. I just feel like the stats aren't there, but the winning is there. The ability to play that winning basketball that Sean talked about is there. And for that, I do think it's going to be enough to push him over the hump. But his Hall of Fame probability on Basketball Reference, that's what got me into
it's 60%.
60.
Yeah.
That is high.
Yeah. And I think, again, and again, I'm not just trying to take shots at this guy, but again, if you're going on the flannel Sam metrics of what it takes to be a Hall of Famer, you look at a lot of like what people look at, which is the stats, which are the flashy numbers, like the things that you expect when you're looking for a Hall of Fame resume. That wouldn't be Rajon Rondo, right? But again, I feel like when you're talking about like especially if you're going to talk about players' votes and like guys among the league, and like who they respect, I feel like when you talk about like who's been one of the like one of the guys that's just exemplified winning over the past 20 years in the NBA, Rajon Rondo's on that list. It's just, again, I also feel like if there were less interpersonal issues and if there were like, a little bit, like if he could have grown his game, I feel like he could have had a better career. I feel like he merely scratched the surface on his personal potential.
Yeah. But if you look at what he was asked to do, or I guess not asked, but what he excelled at defensively and being a floor general, which he's one of the best at both those things. So I guess he has that argument as well.
Yeah.
Maybe we're talking Rajon. But yes, you'd like the scoring to be there. But in terms of basketball Hall of Fame, I do think he'll make it.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, that's fair. Speaking of scratching the surface, that's what we do here each and every week on From Half Court, because we are just getting started, 83 episodes in, and we are only getting better, baby. If you'd like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the pod, be sure you share it with a friend, and join in the conversation down below in the comments. But also, You can follow all of us on social media at Jeff IF Radio on Twitter, at TroyCircuit44, and at Sean F. Court. But also, be sure you're checking out Farm Half Court on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. We're doing awesome content on there that you will not want to miss. But that, folks, is going to do it for today's video. I thank you so much for tuning in. We will catch you guys next time from Half Court. Sure you subscribe.